Hello, awesome people. I hope you're having a great day today. Today we're taking a look at the sixth and final book that we've been reading in the Star Wars series in the Thrawn Ascendency. It's by Timothy Zahn. It's called Lesser Evil. It's the third in the Thrawn Ascendant thing. I also knocked out the first three novels for folks in the Star Wars Extended Universe for you folks. It's a lot of fun. I definitely enjoyed it. So one of the things that we're doing in this series is going back and reading. It's kind of a prequel of the previous stuff. Now, it's about 550 pages long, which is long. It's the longest book in the series. And previously, I had said one of the things I like is that the first book's it's like 480 pages long. It's the longest book. The first five books. One of them is less than 300. Or sorry, a little bit more than 300. And the rest of them were even close to 480, but this one is a massive, long thing, right? And so if you want longer prequels, so I knew going into this would be a longer read for you folks, and it was definitely a longer thing, right? So I knocked it out. I had, if you guys will recall, I've been very impressed with how fast I've been able to go back and read this, since this is an oversized copy. Right, I typically will read an oversized copy at about 15 pages every half hour or so. So I figured, these books that are hundreds of pages long would take me a long time for me to read. But novel speed, the smaller size stuff, is typically more like 20 minutes. 20 pages a minute, rather, and so forth. But I was knocking out this one in roughly 25 pages. And then I was blowing through it in my going back and rereading the first three books in this trilogy. I'm reading for the first time because I'd never read it for books before. So this one was slated for 6 days, 550 pages long, with 100 pages a day each of the first 5 days, and then on the 650 pages. But last night I just wanted to go ahead and finish it. So that way I could kind of conclude that chapter, because it's been a little longer journey for folks since we were in football season. So I often don't read on football day. The two or last night 3.5 hours that I typically set aside, right? Because it's a football day, right? And typically they're that and such, right? So I don't typically have the time to do that and so forth. It's been a little slower and so forth. So I finished that up last night with the last 150 pages and knocked it out. It was a lot of fun stuff. Good stuff was happening. So there you are. So again, this is a prequel to the Thrawn trilogy set in the Star Wars universe. I had read the first three books when I was in high school, shortly after they were published. My dad picked them up, and I just read his copies, so just borrowed them, and so forth. Knocked them out, loved them. And then I started to do a deep dive into the other Star Wars expanded universes stuff, too. That was also getting published in the universe and so forth. That many of them were using characters that were created in this massive, trilogy that introduces the character of Thrawn in the novel Heir to the Empire in a trilogy that's named after Thrawn, and he is the self-titled admiral. He is a grand admiral, the last one surviving after the Republic. The New Republic thought that they had cleaned them all out in the wars and had gotten one, but he's not a human. He's a Chiss. Blue-skinned, red-eyed Chiss, member of a species and such, and in a culture that was so anti-alien as the Empire, that this guy was worth it if he was the only non-human Grand Admiral, right? And so forth. And he was out on the outer areas doing stuff for the Empire's greater glory. So that's why he wasn't involved, and that's why the New Republic doesn't know about him. He's the main antagonist for the first three novels, but now this is the protagonist, and we're going out and finding more about the species, who his people are, and so forth. And they have 9 great ruling families that are ranked from 1 to 9 in order. And then they have 40 great houses that are sort of the next aspect, that also have various orders to them and so forth. And then there are lesser families that wanted to grow up, and then the mid-tier, when I get to the high tier and so forth. And the high tier constantly jockeying. They have different alliances, different people that are friends, different people that are enemies, rivals, and so forth. So there's a lot of politicals, and there's also a lot of backstabbing. There's a lot of behind the scenes politics and deceit and so forth, and even between intra-house and inter-house as well. There are people within Thrawn's house of the myth that will be working against him actively and such. So there you go. So that's kind of the background, the backdrop for it. I found that civilization of the Chiss Ascendency to be somewhat reminiscent to that of the Drow in Ari Salvador's works and such. If you recall, he also has in his prequels of the popular best-selling stuff in the 80s and the Forgotten Realms stuff that he was the first guy for. It was, I also, as a reminder, I've been finding that similarities between his society and that prequel informations and so forth about those, and even their blue skin, and many of them would have red eyes too, not all. So even the skin color and such are similar. So I wouldn't be surprised, if Timothy Zahn had read those and decided to take that for stuff. And one of the interesting things about starting the Star Wars expanded universe with this trilogy of Timothy Zahn stuff is that he was a beloved and great author and heavily published before this stuff. So they really gave this to a high quality guy, right? For example, the aforementioned Forgotten Realms stuff started with Douglas Niles, who was just a company guy who wrote some modules, and then Ari Salvatore, both who had never published before, straight out of school, and was looking for his first book with the Crystal Shard, right? Similarly, the best-selling Dragonlance series started off with Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman, both of which had never published anything before, and certainly not together, right? So that's the sort of thing that was happening at the time. So Timothy Zahn, or even the BattleTech in the series, starting off with that popular Mech Warriors RPG and such, and the BattleTech role-playing game, even they started off in the sci-fi genre instead of fantasy. As a contrast, also didn't have a bunch of established sci-fi writers writing for that, right? So that's sort of the kind of thing that was happening during that time. So I think it's kind of interesting that Star Wars really put a lot of trust in Timothy Zahn, and he really came up with some great stuff. And many of his characters are beloved. And my favorite one's Mara Jade in the first trilogy with folks. There's also a beloved cast and this sort of thing. So basically what's been happening with the Chiss Ascendency, they're isolationists in an area of the galaxy called the Chaos. And there's a lot of different people and so forth. And they're sort of like the high power of them, but they're isolationists. They don't ally with other people. They don't bring other folks in, right? They have their own rules, their own structures, their own politics, and so forth. So there's a lot of political aspects to this, and of maneuvering and such. And Thrawn in here is a brilliant tactician, just like he is in the first two books. He's the most brilliant tactician and technical genius that just have for generations. But he's a political non-mover and shaker. He's a political problem. He just doesn't understand politics. He just doesn't get politics and so forth. So many people see him as a hindrance because of that reason, and they'll think that he'll end up hurting the Ascendency. And that's been a common theme that we'll get throughout it. In the first books, no spoilers, but you'll find out in the first couple of chapters that there's an attack in the first chapter on the Sis, which is the capital of the Ascendency, and a key planet by another race, and so forth. Now the Chiss Ascendency has been put on a warning notice and so forth, and now they're heading out and starting to look for who it is that ultimately get punished in chapter 3, get attacked, and so forth. So that's a pretty quick thing. And now that's up. The first war in the first book. The second book has an internal conflict, an internal strife by the overall powers that be. In the third book, the overall powers that be are having a massive battle and so forth. And there's a huge battle that takes like 50 or 60 pages. I love it. Space battle. It's much more epic, I think, than a lot of folks typically get from their epic space battles. That might spend one chapter or something like that. So I love that this one really did a deep dive into that. He's really good at doing space battles. A lot of fans have hoped that when Disney took over LucasArts, that the Thrawn trilogy would become the take away for the next trilogy stuff, but unfortunately that wasn't to be. So that's sad. But I still think this universe has value, and I still like going back and reading it. For example, when I was at Fairfield University, I worked in residence life in Connecticut. There's a coworker there who was really interested in sci-fi stuff, so I suggested that she start with the Timothy Zahn Thrawn trilogy, and she liked it. She thought it was really good. And so she started doing a deeper dive into it, right? So I still think that this guy's the place to start with. And this book, this trilogy I had never read before, I just bought it. and so forth and knocked it out. I liked it, but it's probably, and again, the epic battle is great, but it's probably just a little too long at the end of it. Stuff, and you can kind of see where it was going. The ending that was supposed to be sort of a surprise, I think, because you read the Thrawn trilogy and you went back and read this, I don't think it's as much of a surprise, right? So forth. So I'm probably giving this more like a 7 out of 10. Love the epic stuff, love the writing. This guy's great, and so forth. But I think the novel's just probably like 50 or 60 pages too long. For folks, I think again it has colitis. It's too long for our final. So there you are. Go ahead and leave it to. Have you read the Lesser Evil by Timothy Zahn in the final of the Thrawn Ascendency trilogy? If so, what did you think about it? Do you agree or disagree with my 7 out of 10? Let's talk about it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this, I hope you'll hit that subscribe button, or even hit the like button and the bell icon too. That's pretty cool. As a reminder, this channel's name is The Worst Thing About New Books, which is a quote by a French philosopher, Jacques Joubert, who said that the worst thing about new books was that they kept you from reading the old ones. So this is definitely it. So I try to find the older stuff to unpack for this channel. Original Trilogy was published decades ago in the early 90s, right? So this stuff is definitely, an older stuff that oftentimes people forget to go back and read, right? While, so there you are. So finally, I just want to thank you so much for taking some time out of your day and investing it in watching my video. We all have so many things that are happening in our lives, pulled in so many different directions. So the fact that you spent this time with me, that's incredibly humbling, and I appreciate it. So thanks again, and have an amazing day.